Now open at the Birthplace of Country Music Museum is a very special exhibit entitled For All the World to See, Visual Culture and the Struggle for Civil Rights. Dr. Rene Rodgers joins us this morning to share with us the story behind this very impactful exhibit. Dr. Rodgers, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
And we were talking, this is going to be there till January 7th, but for you all, this is a short run on it.
It is. It's just about 8.5 weeks.
Right.
For us, that is quite short. So come and see it for sure.
I want to make sure everybody gets there. Make
Definitely.
sure they get there to see this during. Tell us more about it. Give us an overview of what this exhibit is about.
So the exhibit isn't a history of the civil rights movement, but it's actually looking at the way visual imagery impacted and influenced America during that period.
Right.
So both from the standpoint of some of the images that were out there already that were sort of playing into racist tropes or playing into stereotypes and the way those affected people's perceptions, but then also the really strong imagery that was coming out during the movement that was sort of jolting Americans into understanding what was actually happening in the country at the time and thinking about civil rights more deeply because they were seeing these images that were being put out into the media at the time.
And those images come from like the 1940s through the 1970s.
Yeah, so it's going beyond the civil rights, the peak of the civil rights era, and looking at the way that also, because one of the things that we talk about in the exhibit a lot is the fact that for African Americans, representation wasn't really there, except in stereotypical ways where they were actually made quite invisible. So beyond the civil rights movement, when you're seeing these news images, is the representation of African Americans on television, like say with the Ed Sullivan Show, for instance, and how that continued and also influenced the way people felt and thought about these things.
And you actually have some events within the exhibit that are going on. And you had one yesterday, you have another important one coming up. Tell us about it.
Yeah, this is one I'm really excited about because I'm a bit of a comic book nerd. So on Thursday of this week, November 15th at 6:30 p.m., we have a free presentation and talk by Tommy Bryant. He's a professor at Virginia Highlands Community College, and he's going to be talking about images of persons of color in comics and graphic novels, and especially the recent growing trend of Afrocentric graphic novels that are focused on history.
Right.
So for instance, things like the graphic novel March, which is about the history and life of John Lewis, and his role in civil rights and human rights. Or, for instance, Dreaming Eagles, which is a graphic novel about the first African-American fighter pilots in World War II. So it's going to be a really interesting thing. For anyone who's interested in those kind of books, it's going to be very interesting, but also just ties in very well with the exhibit about visual culture and how African Americans are represented and the history that was being shared through these books.
And also coming up soon, you're going to have a soundtrack.
Yes,
that you want folks to get involved with as well.
Yeah, so on Thursday, November 29th, that's a couple of weeks from now,
Right.
we're going to have a film screening of a documentary called Soundtrack for a Revolution. And this is a great way to sort of tie in the subject of this exhibit with our museum because it's all focused on the music of the civil rights era and how that inspired and motivated people, how it was used during the civil rights era. So there's going to be testimony from people who were involved during the civil rights movement, but then a lot of performances and commentary from contemporary artists and musicians also.
And you also have a big panel discussion coming up a little further down the line as well.
Yeah, so that's on December 4th, again at 6:30, and it's a moderated panel discussion. We have 4 panelists and a moderator just talking about how to engage in these type of difficult conversations within your community about race, racial reconciliation, the importance of representation, and also just the strength of media and visual imagery. So it's going to be really tied into the exhibit, but a really great opportunity for people to have a conversation about these things and learn a bit more about it.
Got so much going on between now and January, but you want folks to come and become engaged with this exhibit.
Definitely. I mean, this exhibit, it's a wonderfully engaging exhibit. They've done a great job of telling the story. There's some amazing imagery in it. It ranges from photography, advertisement, bumper stickers, to television clips, to historic artifacts. So all sorts of ways to tell the story. And I think that people will get really interested and learn a lot, and it'll really make you think. And that's what museums are all about, really.
There you go. Let's give everybody some very important information right now. The graphic novels and underrepresented stories is happening Thursday, November the 15th, 6:30 p.m. right there at the Birthplace of Country Music Museum. Check out the website for more information there. And also, Soundtrack for a Revolution, a free film screening. It is Thursday, November the 29th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. right there as well. Check out this exhibit all the way through January. So many events going on along with it.
From Lee's for lunch or dinner, we